Good morning. We'll call Wednesday morning, May 12th, 2021 Criminal Justice Committee meeting to order. Start with roll call, please.
Mr. Hess?
Present.
Mr. Long?
Present.
Mr. Lear?
Present.
Mr. Snipes? Ms. Peters?
Present.
Ms. Parker? Present. Mr. Fairfield?
Present.
Mr. Carrico?
Present.
Mr. Eckhoff?
Present.
Mr. Darrell Smith?
Present.
Mr. Swanson? Mr. Kirkstra? Mr. Hunter?
Present.
Mr. Collins?
Present.
Mr. Kenneth Smith?
Present.
Mr. Wheeler? Mr. Seroy? We have a quorum.
Okay, I have not received any public comment. Is there any public comment at this time? Any public comment? Seeing none, we're going to combine again the approval of the minutes and all the reports. We'll take a motion by Mr. Hunter, second by Ms. Parker. We'll take the roll call vote at the end of the meeting, so we don't have to go through each one individually then. Judicial, Chief Judge is not here. Circuit Clerk's Office, Ms. Cianci.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning. For the regular disbursement report, there's nothing unusual for me unless there's a question any of you have. We dispersed over $400,000 this last month, so we're still a little further ahead than we've been in a while. The state's attorney collection report really did a great job this year, or these last couple months, with record numbers. If you look at the bottom, March, we had $63,600 that we collected, and then April was $27,000. And if you look back at last year for those 2 months, it's tremendously greater than what they were in any of the months for March and April. So really good numbers. And then for the Harris & Harris and the local debt recovery program, the recoveries numbers, you can see that in March and April, again, we surpassed, I've highlighted the March and April by bolding and enlarging the font to bring out those numbers. As you can see, this year, our months of March and April exceeded the total amount of money collected for the same time frame in the last several years. When we started with the Illinois Local Debt Recovery Program, we call it iDrop in the circuit clerk world. We started that in 2015. That year, we collected $1,179,500 in collaboration with them and Harris & Harris. The month to date that year was $509,900. We've exceeded that number this year by $146,000 because this year so far we've brought in $655,972. Part of this program is also a collection court call that the attorneys from Harris & Harris attend. So hopefully this is a trend that will continue for the remainder of the year. And then at the top where it says total recovery since 2011, this program has brought us in almost $10 million. So that's been a great thing also. So are there any questions in any of my reports? Okay, so then a few other things I just, oh, sorry.
That's all right. It's not so much a question as a statement. I think we've gotten a tremendous opportunity because of the programs that have been put in place by your office and the state's attorney's office. I'm reading accounts that are saying people are trying to catch up on a lot of different responsibilities, debts they have. Part of that may well be because of the money that the federal government is putting out. When that money runs out, we may see a dip because people won't have that income. But the fact that we had this program in place meant that we were able to take advantage of it, and that was great.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very much. And these months are the ones that are usually the best months for us anyway, because of it being tax season as well. So, you know, but still hopefully down the line, the rest of the year will be you know, equally as fruitful as it has been, but we're already double what, well, not double, but we're really in good shape compared to all the other January through April, you know, at this time frame. So then another thing I wanted to talk about that's big in our office, starting January 1st of 2022, the protocol for record keeping in the circuit clerk's offices around the state are undergoing a rather large transformation, and the main objective is to focus on judicial performance measures. According to the commission who worked tirelessly on these changes, they state that the data that we, the clerks, gather today is not quite enough to reflect all the judicial performance metrics of a modern court. For example, most of the case management systems can easily determine how many days until a dissolution case is closed, but it's difficult to quantify the effort that is spent in most post-judgment proceedings. We always concentrate, you know, when we're doing the reports, and especially I noticed yesterday when we were listening to the report about the space needs program, and they talked about the fact that cases are down. So maybe the actual new case filings are down, but we have full court calls, and I think it's partially because we concentrate on what's open and closed and what we've moved on, but we don't really have a good handle on the cases that are still going to court for a bunch of reasons. So that's one of the things that the state is concentrating on right now, is changing how we file cases, and how in all of our statistical reports are going to be much more involved starting in 2022. These metrics have evolved beyond the simple, well, as I just talked about, active, inactive, and closed statistics. Different circuits apply different methodology to determine when a case is closed. So they're trying to set a standard so that we can't, you know, like our county does it one way and, you know, another county does it another way. They want us all to do it the same way. Today's judiciary is also more interested in alternative courts and measuring the impact of the self-represented litigant on the court. So this is like our domestic violence treatment court, our veteran treatment court, and drug court. I know that we spend a lot of time, Jim's office and probation and public defender, they spend a lot of time, you know, showing that these courts are good things. And so the statistics that the circuit clerks are going to be doing is going to help correlate that for all the other divisions. Many other states report data to the National Center for State Courts, and for some reason the Illinois data has been labeled incomplete. So the state wants us to step it up and get these numbers for them so that we're in line with the other states across the nation. So the new rules that will affect, it will affect how the state's attorney files criminal cases. There will be more categories. I kind of briefly talked to Jim, and eventually we're going to have some meetings so we can talk about what those new categories are and how this is going to affect everything. I've advised the Chief Judge's office as well, because that's going to affect how the court calls are going to be divided up too. Local and state law enforcement files the traffic and DUI and other citations. They're going to have counts. So in other words, when there's a traffic stop, normally we might have, you know, 3 to 4 tickets or whatever. Well, now in 2022, it's going to be 1 ticket with several counts. So then it's just going to change, you know, the numbers too. So we're not going to have 10,000 traffic tickets every year. We'll probably have 5,000 tickets with, you know, all these different counts. The other expectations, well, and then the civil cases are going to be different too. They're going to break down different categories, like in dissolution cases, they're going to have like with children and without children, and there's going to be specific domestic violence cases. There's going to be a category just for evictions now and foreclosures. Rather than have them lumped into a generic category, it's going to be more specific. The expectations for all of this is to recommend judicial performance standards that will accurately evaluate judicial performance, both on an individual judge level and circuit-wide basis. And it will be developing timelines and disposition expectations, and it will also allow the courts to effectively allocate judicial resources to their best application. So we've had trainings on it in the month of April. And then we're going to be implementing that into our case management systems. And then, like I said, it'll be part of my role to help everybody understand how we have to do it in the future. So that's the exciting things happening in my world right now.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Hunter?
Yeah, I said I wasn't going to ask any questions, but yeah, I had my fingers crossed, I think. But anyway, Madam Clerk, that was quite a mouthful that you conveyed to us. My question is, are you ready for it? What kind of in-service training are you going to have for that? As well as, I think I posed this question to you before, are you cross-training your staff?
Well, we're cross-training to a point. I mean, we still have divisions of what people do. So, I mean, we're on 2 floors, you know, as it is. So cross-training people for traffic when you work in the felony, you know, it just doesn't work that way. But the offices, like in our traffic division right now, they help each other out as much as they can. And the same with the people upstairs in 208 and 209, but everybody has specific things too that they do. But the main office covers all civil and all criminal, so they all help each other out when they're working at the counter and taking the e-filing in and that kind of stuff.
But what happens when somebody goes on vacation, or you have several people going on vacation?
Correct. Well, sometimes I go to court. I mean, we're pretty tight. We don't have enough people to go around a lot of times. So whether they're cross-trained or not.
Is that a priority?
What?
Cross-training.
Sure. I mean, we cross-train. We have quite a few that are cross-trained. It's just that we can't, you know, it's a tight ship. You'll have to come and see how we have it set up right now. It would be a dream to have everybody in the same office on the same floor to manage. That would help us manage a lot better.
And when will you digitize your records?
Well, I am getting quotes for some of that, for some of the back scanning so that we can make room in the basement. And as far as the e-filing is going, we've got some things working, and as soon as I have better information, I'll be able to share that.
And any interns that could do that or expedite that or accelerate that?
We don't have really good luck with interns, and we're a union office on top of that. So, you know, we have to work well hand in hand. I do work very well hand in hand with the union, and I'm not sure that would be something that they'd be interested in.
Mr. Fairfield.
Hi, Sandy. How are you doing today?
Great. How are you?
Alrighty. You're talking about the tickets being combined. Is that going to affect the sheriff's ticket writing software in their cars, or will they have to update that, or will it have?
Well, maybe. I will have to, once they come out with, the state comes out more about how that's going to work, you know, I will be talking to the sheriff's departments and the sheriff department, and I was planning on going to the local law enforcement agencies as well. I go to the law enforcement administrators meetings. I didn't make the last one, but that was one of the things I was going to bring up to them, and then start scheduling when I could go and talk to them so that they understand what we have to do.
All right. Thank you, Sandy.
Sure.
Any other questions? Anything else, Sandy?
No, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, State's Attorney, Mr. Rowe.
Good morning, everyone. You can see from the report, we had 42 bills come back from the last grand jury, which was on April 22nd. We may have had one since then, but it's not going to be included in this report until we update it at the end of the month. So through the end of April, that brought us up to 382 felonies that have been indicted. Just to give you some perspective, it's hard to compare it against last year because we stopped grand juries in March. If you go back to 2019, at this same point in 2019, we had 297. So we're almost 100 ahead of that. And 2019 was 925 total at the end of that year. That's really the highest number that you've ever had in the county's history. It was 2019. So as of right now, we're ahead of that. Some of these cases, I've got to believe, we're kind of in the hopper toward the end of 2020, waiting for grand jury to get going again. So hopefully these numbers will start to level off a little bit. Otherwise, if the trend continues, we're going to have a significant number of felonies going through grand jury this year. And of course, all those cases come into the system. It requires public defenders, it requires circuit clerks, it requires probation officers, everyone that's involved in the system. It requires police officers, deputies to come to court, corrections officers. So that number is it's more than just on paper, it's a very significant number that impacts everyone throughout the criminal justice system and ultimately the county. If you dive into those numbers a bit, you're going to see there's 56 domestic violence related offenses. You have 35, which are the felony domestics. But you've got to include in those, we break them out, but you've also got the stalking offenses. You've got the violations of order of protection, which on the whole, I'd say probably 9 out of 10 of those are going to be domestic related. So that's a significant number. I know Harbor House is putting together a task force with law enforcement. We're going to try to bring the courts into that as well. My office is on board to see what we can do to start to reduce those numbers. We're getting back into the schools through Harbor House to do education. So that's more on the teen dating violence and prevention side of things. But domestic violence is still an issue in the community. So anything you board members can do to support either Harbor House, or if you know people who are in a violent relationship, reaching out to Harbor House or connecting that person with services in the community, please do. Because these numbers ultimately, too many of these over the last few years have turned into domestic violence related homicides. And that is obviously the worst case scenario. So we've got to be ahead of the game on that stuff. Any questions?
Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure you don't have a hard, firm number right now to provide me, but I'm looking at between the city and the county, you're talking almost 70% of the offenses, on the list here that you provided. Vast majority of the domestics as well. If you were just putting a guesstimate number on it, how much of that do you think could be tied to or linked to in a substantial way mental health and substance abuse issues, and also exacerbated by COVID? I think you see where I'm going there, is if we were going to start an initiative to start to address this, and I'm looking for partners mainly in the city, do you think that that's a way to attack this on a fundamental level as we look at allocating resources?
So I think if you're looking at overall crime reduction, you start to get into mental health treatment, of course. Many people that come through the system, mental health is a large component, addiction too. But when you get into domestic violence, that's a really unique offense, because domestic violence is not about mental health, it's not about addiction, it's not about someone being drunk or high. Domestic violence is about power and control. So, and the correlation of that is if someone, if the cause was their alcoholism, the fact that they were drunk, and when they walked down the street, they would beat random people up, or they would go to work and they would beat up their boss. They don't do that. They beat up their spouse, and they beat up their wife because it's about power and control. It's not about the addiction. So I think if we're going to address domestic violence, we've really got to work to get into the homes of people who are committing the violence. Do be more, maybe, I don't want to use aggressive, but maybe more forceful into the community with prevention. intervention initiatives, and ensure that everyone knows that if they're in that relationship, there's an out, that there is a place they can go. You know, the stats show that it takes 7 times before a victim of domestic violence finally leaves that relationship. So we're just sort of up against the cycle of domestic violence to begin with. And 7 times, you know, if that's the average, that means there's many people who stay even longer. So domestic violence, it's a very tough one to tackle. But I think if the county wants to get involved or put some efforts into that, because it is COVID related, right? We saw a big increase in hotline calls during COVID when people were stuck in their homes, when their finances got more complicated. We saw an uptick in not only DV hotline calls, but DV cases, orders of protection coming through. So to the extent it's COVID related, probably we saw an increase there. If the county wanted to get involved on that, I really suggest you sit down with Harbor House, some of the other community partners addressing the issue, and and see what can be done.
Thank you.
Mr. Hunter.
Jim, I'm really pleased that you provide empirical evidence, and I know once before that you discussed the correlation of COVID and domestic violence and people out of work and families being in close proximity, which exacerbate tension, so forth. So are you suggesting, I think I was leaning over and talking to the chairman, so is there a need for social workers in Kankakee City Police Department for intervention? That's one question. Additionally, with respect to internships, I know that you use interns. Is there a problem with organized labor with respect to your program?
So I know that I don't know whether there's a need for social workers in the police department. I'm not going to speak for the police operation, but I can tell you Harbor House and my office, we have grants outstanding right now that in event of a domestic violence incident, Harbor House would have advocates that would go out to the scene and be there basically with the victim to ensure that they get immediate access to resources, immediate care, that they're informed of their rights. And then the grant through our office would allocate victim witness advocates who would go out into the community and do those follow-ups. Because a lot of times the reason it's hard to bring someone who commits a domestic violence act to justice is lack of cooperation later down the road by a survivor. It's just part of the domestic violence cycle. So those advocates would be in the community to encourage that ongoing cooperation. So we're trying to tackle it from that way, access to resources as well as support systems in place. As far as the union issue, the state attorney's office is not a union office. So we don't have a concern when we're bringing in interns. At the same time, we're not really bringing in interns in our office to do the work of the office. I want to say it's more for their learning, more of a learning opportunity for the intern. They get to shadow some attorneys. They may assist sometimes with some copying or maybe some internet research on a case. But on the whole, it's really just giving them the opportunity to be a part of the office, experience it. Most of them are either in law school or looking to go to law school. Sometimes a few of them, if they have the proper license from the Supreme Court and they're in their last year of law school, we let them come in and they may assist an attorney on a couple traffic trials. But we wouldn't have the same hurdles as Ms. Janssen's office because of us being a non-union office.
Thank you.
Anything else? Mr. Snipes.
Jim, there's a question that I could ponder. Generally, when you get a traffic ticket and you want court supervision, you have to go to, I believe, KCC to a driver's ed program as part of the condition of receiving the ticket. I wonder if in the initial state, when a person first commits this domestic violence, that as a part of any condition that they would have to go to a family a family reunification program that would offer a holistic approach, not only the mental health side of that, but also mentorship into how you can express yourself without going to the limits of harming someone, if that makes sense. Is anything like that available into the county?
So we have two programs like that. One is called Hope, one is called Choices. When individuals are charged with, usually it's a misdemeanor domestic battery, they come into the system, it's their first offense. It's been in place for a very long time, actually. I believe Judge Elliott may have brought it into the system as part of the DV diversion program. But she offers them the opportunity to go to Hope or Choices. The first component of that program is substance abuse related. The second component of it is DV counseling. It's a significant commitment. You know, after you complete the substance abuse component, I think it's a 26 or 28-week counseling program on domestic violence. So that does exist, it is offered. And I will say there was a study done, it's probably been a decade ago now, but it did show that individuals who went through that program were less likely to recidivate back into the system due to domestic violence incident, as opposed to individuals who went through a traditional conviction, you know, probation, conditional discharge, jail sentence.
So is it mandated or is this by choice?
That's an option that they're given. The defendant always has the opportunity to, of course, proclaim their innocence and go to trial. Or if they didn't want to do the program, they don't want to deal with the counseling, the treatment, I assume they could just plead guilty and take the conviction and whatever sentence the court would hand down.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anything else for us, Mr. Rowe?
No, everyone have a good day.
All right, thank you. Up next, Mr. Pennewick, Public Defender's Office.
I muted him.
Yep.
You had to let him know he's on mute.
You're muted, Ed.
Fine.
There
How's
you go.
that?
That's good.
All right, sorry about that. Nothing specific to report today. If anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, but that's pretty much, we're just getting back to business. Cases are getting closed again. I think we're much more, the entire court system is just much more active than it used to be, which is the way it should be. But other than that, I have nothing specific to add to the report.
Any questions for Mr. Pennewick?
That'll work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, probation, Mr. Latham. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. As you can see on the monthly report, just a few things. Our pretrial numbers in our adult division continue to climb each month. We're currently at 220, as you can see there. But the number that stands out in April is our juvenile division, and the sharp increase in the number of detention screenings. We screened 28 last month, or in the month of April, which is double the normal number. We detained 11, and that puts our juvenile detention numbers right now at 14, 9 at River Valley. We detained, there's 13 on your report, but we detained one last night. So, and these cases are for, criminal sexual assault, ag battery, ag UUW, domestics. The one last night was aggravated UUW and a DUI. So no longer are these minors being detained just for technical violations of their probation order and things like that. It's some serious offenses. So we'll keep watching that. We currently have 19 adults on electronic monitoring and 7 juveniles on home confinement. And that's it on the monthly report, unless anybody has any questions.
Questions on the monthly report?
Mr. Snipes?
Oh, Mr. Snipes, sorry.
Good morning. Those individuals that are on home consignment that are juveniles, do they are they still receiving adequate educational opportunities they would?
Oh, yeah, they're going to school as part of the home confinement order.
Okay.
So failure to go to school, they can be actually detained.
Oh, okay.
And so we definitely, they have a certain amount of time to get there, a certain amount of time to get home. And if some of those individuals are on electronic monitoring, we can track that they did go directly home and directly to school kind of thing. Others were phone calls or going to the homes, making sure you're here.
Do we also track and look at their grades to make sure they're just not showing up and doing nothing?
Oh yeah, that's reported when they go back for a court review. In most cases, they'll have that information. If it's not, they'll get it from the school and say, listen, they're going, but they're not doing what they're doing or whatever. So they do monitor that. Now this is, a lot of those individuals are on pretrial type phase of things, but they will get that report from the school.
Okay.
But not as much, not as in depth that they're on probation and they're constantly communicating with the school. So,
thank you.
Any other questions?
the only other thing I have is last month, we briefly discussed public service work. The sheriff discussed it. In the past, our office coordinated and monitored all public service work, the program. That was cut, I think it was back in 2010 when we had budget cuts and staff reductions. The program basically went back to the courts. They ordered the hours and tried to monitor them the best they could. For the last couple months, I've been in discussions with obviously Judge Creamer and more so Judge Cunnington and Judge Nicholson, who order a lot of, through traffic court and DUIs, order a majority of the public service work, about taking that program back over. I think what that's going to do is, right now, we've been receiving requests from the Corrections Department, Kankakee City, other 501, it was a 501c3 type organizations, and we just don't have the list. We have only individuals that are on probation with us, and that's a very low number that are ordered hours. Most of those are transfer cases from other jurisdictions that we're monitoring. So we just didn't have the people. But once we're responsible for all of it, we'll have those names, we'll have that list. So when someone calls and says, we need 5 people at the American Legion, or we need whatever, we can get those people, and we can recruit more sites, be actively recruiting. We can more closely monitor are those hours done? Is it accurate? What you're submitting back to giving us, we can check on that. And obviously that's difficult for the court. So I think once we get this going, it'll be, it was a very good program in the past. I think it helped every community in this county. And so I'm hoping within the next couple months, we can start getting those individuals. The court was happy because now they're setting review dates just to see the completion of hours, and they can cut down on that and the traffic in the courthouse. So I think the judges are very happy about it. I think it'll be a good thing. I think it'll be good for everybody. So any questions on public service work? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Up next, the sheriff. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. The report is, I apologize for the tardiness of it. Unfortunately, Kelly was on the ball and sent me a reminder email that I didn't send it to her. So I think you would have gotten it yesterday. Our numbers of out of counties are remaining where they have been virtually all year. They're not moving a whole lot, which obviously, as you well know, are significantly lower than they have been in years past. ICE is still in a holding pattern, if you will, and the marshals are periodically, we're getting a few here and there, but as they go through the court system, we lose those as well. So our numbers have been relatively stagnant. Our transports have decreased significantly to Chicago for both ICE and the marshals, which has a benefit of not putting miles on vans. So we're really holding off, even though our vans are getting up there in miles and age. We are holding off as long as we can to replace those, so that's one positive out of it. What else? DOC, it's an ongoing issue, still the same. We got about 30 plus inmates that we're waiting to bring. The information that IDOC provided to our local newspaper was, I hate using the term, so I'll just say it was a fabrication. But that's okay. We'll continue to deal with it. There are a number of other counties having the same issue as us. So we hope to get some resolution at some point, but if there's only one side willing to talk about it, there's not going to we're not going to get much done. So
can I ask a question, sir? Did the paper contact you for accuracy of that report that they received, or?
No, I talked to them on one hand when we originally talked, and then they called the Department of Corrections and got their information, and then he printed it. I did send him an email indicating everything that what she said, what their PIO said was inaccurate.
Okay.
But that's okay. I don't, I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing about it. I'm tired of talking about it until there's some resolution to it. I mean, it is what it is. If we have good news to report, I'll be more than happy to bring it to you. But again, we're talking from our standpoint, when you think about staffing and everything, 30 plus inmates for us is almost an entire housing unit. So that's money that we can save and save our local taxpayers. So at this point, we can't do it. Will County's in the same boat. I talked to their sheriff 2 days ago. He's got over 50 that he's waiting to bring, and there's just no communication. There's no, I mean, our guess is ultimately they're going to start looking at options to start keeping people with 1 to 2 year sentences in county jails. I mean, I see that coming, which again will be a cost to our local taxpayers. So like I said, I'll bring
Mr. Wheeler.
I'll bring the good news to you when I get it.
Has there been any other instances where somebody has concluded their sentence, but they're still here? Since we last
Fortunately,
talked?
no.
Okay.
We have, I think, bringing that issue to light, I think, woke somebody up in Springfield. And we are now, even though they won't take our 30, when somebody gets to that date, DOC says, oh, you can bring him or her. So basically, we are housing, they are spending their entire sentence in Kankakee County. We bring them to DOC where they process them, and then they're out in 3 hours. So Kankakee County has virtually spent the money housing them as opposed to the state of Illinois.
Well, they spent it twice because they've also paid taxes for the state of Illinois to house them as well.
Right.
That sounds fair.
A couple things of note that I would consider COVID related. If you look under the sworn services, under the traffic in the accidents in April of 2020, there were 17. If you remember when we went on lockdown, shutdown, whatever you want to talk about, whatever you want to call it, people weren't moving, they weren't going to work, they were staying home. We had 17 accidents and this is just that we handled, the county handled. But now you see in 2021, we've virtually doubled that number. So people are moving. Those numbers are increasing a little bit. One positive, the civil process numbers. If you look at 2020, we served in April 256 papers. In 2021, we served 361. So that again, with everything shut down back in March and April, our numbers certainly decreased. The downside of that, as Mr. Rowe alluded to, We had 61 domestic batteries in April of 2020. We had 123 this April. So that number virtually doubled, and that's, unacceptable. So obviously some COVID related things that, we continue to deal with. Those numbers will change, but that's about it on the report.
Any questions or comments on the report? Moving on.
Oh, Mr. Snipes.
Who?
Just
Oh,
one. So,
Mr. Snipes, okay.
so what I'm hearing is that after you all brought the inmate attention that exceeded the day of emancipation to the powers that be, that they in turn made sure that they're being taken care of. I wonder, and I don't think you can do it, but it's just always a thought, is if I could take all 30 inmates to the processing center in Stateville and just wait till they come and deal with them and say, these are your folks.
Yeah,
I know we can't do it.
Yeah,
but
they would not. Yeah, so as it works now, I mean, we call them and we make a reservation, kind of like you're calling your hotel. And we say we have, in our case, we have 30, whatever, 33. And then they will take that number down, and then they will notify us when they'll take us. So,
which is almost nice.
If you show up without a reservation, just like a hotel, they won't let you in. So.
Moving on, sir.
Yeah, I mentioned the vans earlier. We're holding off as long as we can on those. The cars as well. As we move forward, and we have one lease expiring, I'm not sure when, but we are keeping an eye on that so that we don't get into more leases. If we can just continue that particular lease, we would like to do that if we are able to, because we don't want to spend more money on vehicle maintenance than we would on the car itself. So we'll keep an eye on that. Obviously, we're not going to, with the finances the way they are and everything, we are not going to overburden the county for cars if we can avoid it. So we will definitely keep an eye on that. Mr. Hunter asked me a little bit ago about body cameras. We are waiting for a response for the grant that we applied for also. So we were notified that we will get some information back in a couple weeks. So we should know fairly quickly, which would reduce that cost as we had talked about at finance as well. So we'll keep an eye on that.
I think you had, May 15th to get that request?
Yeah, we submitted it.
Yeah,
we submitted it, then they will respond. So what's today? Today's the 12th. So yeah, we've already submitted it. We actually submitted it when finance approved it, and we'll wait to hear back from them. And then I got,
Mr. Snipes.
I guess I could have waited, but I do know that by June 11th, they're going to be opening up, I guess, the state back to being normal, which means Kankakee County would be back to normal, which means the youth, it's the summertime, and the youth and them are going to be on the street. And so given all of that and your current budget, do you foresee anything different as far as the numbers rising, or would it?
It's hard to predict because, quite frankly, what's going on now in the streets, it's almost like we're open now. So I don't see too much of a change. But obviously we'll keep an eye on it. And again, as I've told this committee before, we are so fortunate that whatever municipality it is, we work well together, and we will continue to do that. And if we need help, we'll ask another agency for help, just like if another agency needs help and asks us, we will help them. So we'll all continue to work together.
That sounds good. Thanks.
I got two things. I don't always do it, but I do like to end on a positive note. The first one's a reminder that the police memorial is Friday at 11 o'clock at the courthouse. All are welcome, and we'd love to see you there. And lastly, I have somewhat of a interesting story about one of our new deputies who we just sent 2 deputies to PTI on Sunday, and one who was a NCAA sprinter. And as whether you know or not, it's so when we send a deputy to PTI, they have to complete the fitness test, which includes sit-ups, a reach test. They have to run 1.5 miles in a certain amount of time, depending on their age, and they have to bench press 1% of their body weight. One of our deputies that we sent, who is I would call him a world-class sprinter, came in last Thursday and said, I pulled a hamstring. Training. This is a world-class sprinter. Of course, my response to him was, I'm 58 years old, I work out 3 times a week, I've not pulled a hamstring. So kind of give him a little grief. So we told him, so the options at PTI were he can either, they do the test on Monday, which would have been 2 days ago, or he can take 2 steps Monday, which would fail him, and then he could retake it on Thursday. Well, we got a call Monday afternoon that he muscled through and passed on Monday with a pulled hamstring. So credit to him and his dedication to wanting to get through this. And so we were happy that we don't have to, had he not been able to do it, we would have had to wait for the next class, and it would have been, so credit to him for having guts enough to muscle through. I don't think I could have with a pulled hamstring, so I don't think many could have, so.
No.
That's all I got.
Animal control update?
Oh, animal control. Yes. We continue to battle our building. It's almost a catastrophe day after day with holes in the ceiling, the pipes, everything. So we continue. Maintenance has stepped up and helped us fix a lot of these things, although the last time Roto-Rooter came out, his exact words were something to the effect that I don't know how much longer we can do this before it breaks, before it bursts. So that's a little scary for us, but we'll continue to, Carrie's doing a great job over there, and the staff's doing a great job over there, and they'll continue to do it. So
maybe we can move you into the old Treasures building over here. Oh, that was not.
I think that's what you'd call throwing good money after bad.
That was bad. I apologize. That was bad. Any questions for the sheriff? Ms. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a question, but Sheriff, the signs for the wildfowl will be delivered here today at 1 o'clock, and I'm going to pick them up tomorrow and deliver them to the park districts. So they'll be
awesome.
out.
Good deal.
So thank you.
I think Mr. Rowe and I are splitting that cost or whatever.
Yes.
So just tell me what we owe.
Mr. Rowe has left. We'll check with him. He did get an invoice.
He's paying,
good.
He's paying 75, you're paying 20.
I'm here. When I hear money, I'm here. You all hold.
Darn.
I'll get that bill over to him, Ms. Parker.
Yes. Just let me know what I owe, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Up next, Coroner's Office, Mr. Cavender. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Just a couple highlights on our report for the month of April. You can notice that our calls for service were up from March. However, autopsies were down, which is always a nice thing to see for our budget. One potential reason that we saw an increased number of calls were we did see a little surge in COVID cases again during the month of April. There were 13 deaths attributed to COVID during that month, so that's the most we've seen since January. So likely a little bit of a reason why the numbers were up. But no other real highlights to report on that report, unless anybody has any questions on it.
Questions on that report?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Yeah,
Mr. Hunter.
I was just telling the chairman here that this is probably one of my favorite committees in terms of, it's almost like a 400 level class with the information, that comes from the state's attorney's office, public defender, probation, sheriff, coroner's office, and some of the other stuff. It's really interesting, and I notice when the various department heads are giving their reports, people are very attentive in terms of receiving and being very receptive to the information that's disseminated. And I just, my hat goes off to the department heads for their presentations and the data. That's what's really important. So, if you know better, what is it? You know better, you do better. But it's kind of really interesting to see the data that's provided to us so we can make learned and pragmatic decisions on all kinds of things that we're asked to vote upon. I just want to make that comment.
Thank you. Mr. Wheeler.
Just the COVID question. Are we still in a place where you're seeing cases, the COVID cases always have a comorbidity? There's never a solo COVID out there, or are we seeing any COVID's the only cause of death?
So, well, I had that down further on here, but we'll jump to it now.
Okay.
That is correct. Every case that we've had in this county has had a chronic other condition attached to it.
Okay.
There's not been any outliers. This fiscal year, we've had 79 deaths where COVID has been listed on the death certificate, making that 204 since the pandemic started last month. Our first COVID death was on April 1st of 2020, so 204 since that date. Average age continues to be right around 74 years old, and we have no known deaths of any vaccinated people from COVID in this county. So that's a positive either, or also. Answer your question?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
On your monthly receipts, this is just a dumb question, but did you guys keep any statistics on cremations during the COVID compared to full burials?
Let's go back. If we go back to the report, if you look at like December, 154 total calls, 107 cremations. So 75% of all deaths cremated are roughly there. Yeah. So I mean, that's much higher than the average of about 50%. I could go back and look at last year's report, and we would probably be able to see a trend.
That's
maybe
what I was wondering.
Starting like last April, where those numbers increase. So, I mean, I think it's usually between 50 and 60% every month is cremation.
Yep.
Which if you go back 10 years ago, it's significantly higher than even then. So it's good for us. It's every time somebody's cremated, we get a $50 permit fee. So it's a good way to generate money. So if there's a positive side to it anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So. Any questions on the reports? Go ahead.
I think that.
Mr. Hunter.
Yeah, first. Just a question, Mr. Cavender. I know that, that there is reimbursement for COVID-related deaths in terms of if Snipes dies and I was my brother. No, I'm not that I'm wishing you were, but I'm just saying, and he died from COVID, I can get some reimbursement.
Yes. Yeah.
So you assist and consult and let people know?
So when the federal government released that information, we were inundated with phone calls. Everybody wanted COVID on their death certificate. People who died in a car accident, things like that. And we're like, well, that's not what this was intended to be for. we can't alter a death certificate that a physician has signed. So we would only be responsible for cases that we've signed, cases that on this report you see listed under the coroner's column there. So a lot of it falls back on the physicians to amend and fix. There have been a few that have been changed, but the restrictions in which to get reimbursement by FEMA are very stringent. You cannot have any life insurance. You really have to have nothing attached to your name in order to qualify for any of these funds. So there have been people that are going through the motions to try and get this money, and some are going to get it, but some are not going to, based on their need, I guess, is what the federal government's most looking at. We did communicate with all the funeral homes locally. We sent them a letter outlining the criteria that FEMA released so that they were educated on the process, how to amend a death certificate, whether through us or through the state of Illinois based on the circumstances. So we tried to educate locally our partners in all of this so that they were well versed in how to go about best doing it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Snipes first.
Yes, I noticed, because I am on the spectrum, when they do have funerals, whether it's a chaplain or whether it's a musician, or just being there in the service, that most are going with the traditional funerals, but when it comes to the burial, they're kind of gravitating towards the cremations more so. I'm more sentimental to the traditional burial, but I saw that is like rising more often than not at many of the funerals that we're attending now. So I guess it's good for the environment, you know, save space, but it looks like a lot of people are trending that way.
That's correct, yes.
Mr. Wheeler.
Did we ever find out if our expenses for final expenses, if you will, for people that are indigent, is that recoupable to the county?
It would be.
I think it is.
If COVID was on their death certificate, we went back and looked at those ones, and none of them were on that list of COVID cases. So unfortunately, no.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
But we are keeping track of all of our COVID expenditures. You know, anytime we get a COVID death and we go through and tally, you know, the statistical information and things like that, we're keeping track of all that. So at some point, we'll have that discussion about that reimbursement factor, and obviously that'll help at the year-end report. So.
Any other questions yet? Mr. Snipes again.
Just one other. How are the COVID cases in Kankakee as far as death is concerned? I do know that individuals have caught it, but haven't heard, it seems like the fatalities are have decreased tremendously.
Well, I talked to, in early April, I talked to Becky Powell, who's the EMA manager for the Sheriff's Department, because we started to see a little bit of an increase, and she had said that all along they expected 4 surges. Had something to do with the flu years and years ago. They had 4 surges, and they were expecting the same from this. So in April, I think the health department as well reported that numbers were up slightly across the board. We saw that. In March, we only had 1 death. In April, we had 13, where COVID was on the death certificate. And 13 was the most since January, where I think there were 19. I think December was 54 or something like that. So little uptick. I think in the month of May, we've seen 4 so far, but nothing like November, December of last year, or April or May of last year. So I think the trend is definitely downward, which is good.
Good. Any other questions?
Okay. Had a follow-up from Mr. Lear from April. I think you had asked about suicides, media report that you had seen. So I went back and looked at our numbers for the last 5 years. Unfortunately, each of the last 5 years, we've averaged 12 suicides, the most in 2017 and 2019 when there were 19 in each year, the fewest in 2018 when there were 4 total. 2013 saw 13, or I'm sorry, 2020 saw 13. And then thus far in 2021, the fiscal year, we've had 5. So hopefully that sheds a little bit of light for you on that topic.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Mr. Lear?
I was just saying thank you, that was helpful.
Okay.
The other thing that Coroner Gessner usually talks about, obviously, is overdoses. So real quickly on that, this fiscal year we're at 18 cases confirmed, 6 pending cases. So we're averaging 1 overdose every 6.75 days. So if you factor that out, we're right on target to be right around 54 again, which is obviously concerning, potentially higher than last year. So we didn't seem to get hit as hard this time when the stimulus money came out. Again, the 3rd round of checks, we got hit the 1st and 2nd times pretty hard in the days following that. But this 3rd time, we never really saw an increase. Will County, I know, did. Our doctors reported a large number there. So any specific questions on overdoses? Otherwise, the data pretty much is consistent with that as far as age and those types of factors.
Questions? Comments?
Finally, and on a little bit of a positive note, in the last week and a half or so, Coroner Gessner and I both had the opportunity to go up to Kane County. They just opened up a 58,000 square foot multi-use facility and spent $13.2 million. I see the chairman's red in the face. No, we're not asking for a new building. So, but it was nice to see, and credible facility, very, very big. The coroner's facility in Kane County previously was about 3,000 square feet. And so it's a massive improvement for them. They went to 11,000 square feet with an additional 5,000 square foot shell that they could eventually expand into as they grow. So it's massive. It's very nice, very big, shiny, bright, all of that. Everything you would expect with a new building. But in us talking after both of our tours there, we both walked away feeling appreciative and grateful for what we have here. I think that we provide a great service to the citizens of this county when, unfortunately they have to deal with us. And I think as a county as a whole, we should be proud of what we have here compared to much larger counties like Kane and DuPage and what they offer as well. So it made me think back to my days of mortuary school about a decade ago, where we talked a lot about how we judge a society by how well they treat their dead. And we do a good job of that. And I think that the investments that this county has made in our department since especially 2005 when the morgue was built, and all of the further advancements since then speak volumes and have enabled us to grow as a society. So I think that's a huge credit not only to the coroner for his leadership in that stuff, but also to you guys as a board for supporting our initiatives and our ideas, previous boards and future boards. And in the coming weeks, I know we're gonna have a lot of discussions on ways that we can continue to advance our office, some ideas and concepts that we've developed, and hopefully in the long run will benefit the county in terms of cost savings measures, but also the citizens that we serve. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Questions or comments?
All right.
All right.
See you in June.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any old business to come before the committee? Any new business to come before the committee? Ms. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that we're criminal justice, but as a public safety comment, as a grandmother of a grandson who suffered brain trauma injury, I'm seeing a lot of young people out there on skateboards and motorized vehicles not wearing a helmet. And just a reminder to the parents and to the kids to please wear a helmet, because there's nothing worse than seeing someone you love in critical condition and having to go to a brain trauma unit for recovery. So please get those helmets on.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor for all the reports and the minutes. We'll take a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Snipes?
Aye.
Ms. Peters?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Carrico?
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff?
Aye.
Mr. Darrell Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Mr. Collins?
Aye.
Mr. Kenneth Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
Mr. Kirkstra.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion, but before I make that motion, I have a comment that I wanted to make, but I've had a little hesitancy to express my feelings. We talked earlier about the domestic violence that we have in our community, while maybe minor. Quite personally, coming from a family and an upbringing of domestic violence, at 64 or 65 years old now, I still feel the effects of it. This is a very serious matter within our society, not just within this county. And I really can't talk too much more about it. But
I understand that, sir.
I would implore each and every one of us, and especially on the male side of our society, to really take a serious and close look at our actions. Let's not ruin the lives of our children in our society, or put any more on them than what is absolutely necessary. Teach them to be good human beings and treat each other with respect and dignity. With that said, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we close.
Seconded by Ms. Peters.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.